Welcome once again to TrainerRoad's Workout of the Week. I'm Coach Chad Timmerman, Coach T if brevity is your thing, and this week I'd like to turn our focus to a workout by the name of Twin Peaks, which is pretty simply 3 intervals comprised of little 30-second steps focused primarily on improving our muscle endurance, but efforts that are also going to benefit our aerobic capacity or VO2 max system. The workout begins with 12 minutes worth of warm-up, and if you know from past experience that 12 minutes doesn't get you quite ready to work pretty hard, then feel free to get on the bike and spin for 10 or 15 minutes before you kick this off. Then when you begin, after just a few minutes of easy pedaling, there'll be a 2-minute warming ramp to get the metabolic clearing processes rolling, then a short little break, then you'll encounter a 1-minute VO2 max effort, which will expose you to the highest amount of effort you're going to face over the course of this workout, assuming you don't scale it upward. After that, there's a 4-minute recovery valley to allow you to flush some of the buildup and calm your breathing a bit before we kick off the intervals themselves. Each of the intervals are 12 minutes long, and as I mentioned earlier, they're comprised of 30-second steps. The first set of steps is the most rigorous in that it climbs to the highest power output, but the real challenge starts as soon as you start stepping back down from that point. Getting up to it is one thing, but gradually stepping back down and slowly dissipating the muscle burn, all the while trying to rein in your breathing, remain relaxed, and maintain your form, is where the true challenge and benefit of these intervals lies. And it's why I chose this as the workout of the week, because perhaps better than any other workout, these gradual steps down from a high level of overload teach riders pretty simply to be tough, to work through high levels of fatigue, to avoid bailing out when most other riders will, and it helps them foster an understanding of just how hard they can push themselves without actually needing that break that they want so desperately. There's a big difference between needing recovery and wanting recovery, and more times than not, riders recover simply because they want to, when if they committed to working longer, they could actually pull it off, which is beneficial both in terms of competition and in terms of training. This first effort begins right at threshold. So from the very start, your muscles are going to load up to the point where any increase in workload is going to drastically limit how long you can stay there. And then 30 seconds later, it steps up slightly, 3% of your functional threshold. Every 30 seconds until we get to the point where you've stepped all the way up to 115% of threshold, which is a difficult spot to get to, and even tougher spot to work your way out of. Following that 30 seconds, each additional 30 seconds brings a 3% decrease in the power you have to sustain until 6.5 minutes into this interval, you find yourself at 91% of threshold. And while it's not an easy effort level to maintain, it's far more tolerable, and it will have allowed your muscles to clear, your breathing to come down a little bit, and you yourself to have ditched a little of that excess tension that probably mounted as you worked your way up and down that high peak. It's at this point that you're going to begin the second ascent, but this one's quite a bit more friendly in that it only ascends to 106% of threshold. But by now the fatigue's high, the lactate's high, and it won't take very long at all before your muscles flood to a pretty uncomfortable point where again you're going to spend several steps working your way out of that uncomfortable level until you finish at that same 91% of your functional threshold power. Following a 5-minute recovery interval, you'll begin the same thing again, and then repeat it one final time for a total of 3 12-minute intervals, 36 minutes worth of work. Couple tips for a workout of this nature is, first off, as the power requirements increase and it becomes a little tougher to stay on top of your cadence, do your best to do exactly that. When your cadence falls, the muscle contraction become longer and more powerful, and therefore more taxing. And unless you're already a very muscular rider, and even if you are, it's not in your best interest to fatigue the muscles any more than is necessary. So try to keep your cadence above 90 RPM. If at all possible, ride a little quicker than usual, especially on the ascents up to each of those 30-second long peaks. And then on the way down, if you had to sacrifice some of your cadence, then use the downward segments to get back on top of that spin. And something you might consider trying in the event that your cadence starts to fall is coming forward a bit on the saddle. Without tipping your pelvis forward onto your pubic bone, think of sliding your entire hip carriage forward on the saddle so that you're a little bit closer to your stem. Your sit bones might leave contact with the wings of the saddle, but this is a small sacrifice to make for a more powerful position. It brings with it some of the same advantages you derive when you get out of the saddle, but getting out of the saddle can be taxing. Whereas if you just creep forward a little bit toward your handlebars, you'll place yourself in a position that's a little more over your bottom bracket, over your cranks, over your feet, and it's a little easier to eke out power in what amounts to be a slightly more uncomfortable position, but a temporary one. And when it comes to scaling this workout, if you reach a point of low cadence, high muscle stress, you're falling apart in terms of form, your breathing's ramped too high, you can take a brief backpedal break. And when I say brief, I mean brief. We're not looking for recovery, we're looking for something that keeps you in the interval. So simply backpedal long enough to get a couple extra breaths in. Typically I recommend 5 to 10 back pedals. So choose a knee, count that knee 5 to 10 times, and then get back in the interval. And what this does is allows your muscles to clear off just a little bit of that excess, allows you to get just a little more air in your lungs, but it doesn't come at the expense of the workout's intended benefit. So quick back pedal breaks and then get back in there. If you find yourself backpedaling frequently, more than let's say 3 times with a 12-minute interval like this, drop your workout intensity 5%. If after dropping at 5% you find you still can't stay on top of things, try another 5% reduction. But typically one 5% drop can be the difference between making an interval very productive as opposed to impossible. If you choose to scale the workout upward, you don't necessarily need to increase the wattage. Rather, you can spend one 30-second step seated, the next 30-second step out of the saddle. And not only does this help you practice your out of the saddle form, but it can also help you work on transitioning in and out of the saddle. Pretend as though a rider were clinging to your rear wheel, and if you stand in an uncontrolled manner, you're going to push your wheel back into that rider's front wheel and cause, at best, a bobble, at worst, a crash. And you don't have to alternate in and out of the saddle every 30 seconds. Rather, sprinkle in a 30-second out of the saddle effort occasionally, and do it with great control, both moving out of the saddle and then returning to the saddle. When it comes to the goals for a workout like Twin Peaks, one that combines muscle endurance with aerobic capacity, the physiological upside is that our muscles learn to better tolerate that acidic accumulation. Whether it's lactate, hydrogen ions, isn't of great importance. What matters most is that our muscles burn, and we need to figure out how to tolerate that both physiologically and psychologically. The physiological adaptations come when you train above the work level that your muscles are used to sustaining, repeat that sort of stress, and then of course recover properly, both within the workout and more importantly after the workout. In terms of psychologically accommodating that level of fatigue, it's a similar situation in that you have to routinely expose yourself to that level of stress. And in doing so, you can condition your mind to tolerate greater and greater levels of pain. And when you do that, your body actually interprets that stress in a different way. To put it simply, the messages your brain receives aren't necessarily messages of danger, which, depending on the model of fatigue that you subscribe to, can be the messages that actually limit performance. So if your mind learns to accept those messages as just another form of stress, something you do routinely, something that's not going to cause any physical harm, you'll find yourself more and more able to work through higher levels of stress, higher levels of muscle abuse and acidic accumulation. And then when it comes to the VO2 max portion, the time that's spent at roughly 105% of your functional threshold power and higher, it's at that time that we're teaching our muscles to better process the oxygen that we're delivering. Not only that, but we get better at delivering oxygen to the muscles, both through increases in the amount of blood vessels that carry the blood to the muscle and in terms of the heart's capacity. And finally, there are some adaptations at the cellular level where the muscle cells themselves become capable of processing more oxygen and producing more energy. And I'll conclude this breakdown of our workout of the week by talking about the actual nuts and bolts. The workout is 60 minutes long, and the training stress score is 84 points out of a possible 100 in a 1-hour workout. So it's up there, but not quite as rigorous as some of the anaerobic capacity or exclusively VO2 max workouts you've seen so far. The intensity factor is 0.92, so that does rank right up with the more stringent workouts of the week. But again, definitely something that's not only doable, but a workout that some riders might actually scale up a bit. And then in terms of cadence recommendations for this workout, I already mentioned that a 90 plus RPM is recommended, but it's not requisite. If at some point you fall below 90 RPM and your power is still on target, then you're still very much in line with what we're hoping to accomplish with this workout. Over time though, learn to recognize that those slower pedal strokes, 85 RPM and lower, come at great muscular expense. And over the course of a long workout, or a workout that involves a lot of power output, that stress accumulation is going to take a toll, one that may limit how well you can finish a race or a ride. That should do it for this week's workout of the week. Good luck, have fun, and thanks again for using TrainerRoad.